There are two words that have been whispered through every scripture, hidden inside every miracle, and buried beneath every story of a person who received what looked impossible. Two words so small that the mind skips over them, and so powerful that the moment you truly understand them, your entire relationship with money, luck, and chance will be rewritten from the inside out. Those two words are, I am. Understand this. You have said these words 10,000 times without knowing what you were doing. You have said, I am tired. You have said, I am broke. You have said, I am unlucky. You have said, I am the kind of person things never work out for. And every single time you attached a feeling to those two words, you were not describing your life. You were writing it. You were not reporting your condition. You were issuing a command to the deepest part of you that has no sense of humor, no capacity for doubt, and no ability to argue with you. It simply says, yes. Whatever follows I am, it builds. Whatever follows I am, it becomes flesh, becomes circumstance, becomes the numbers that do or do not appear on a ticket, becomes the doors that open or stay locked, becomes the very shape of your days. Think about this for a moment. When you imagine winning, what do you actually feel? Be honest with yourself in this moment, because honesty is the beginning of all inner work. Do you feel the trembling hope of someone begging the universe for a favor? Or do you feel the quiet, settled knowing of someone who has already received? These are not the same state. One is a prayer sent upward, hoping something out there will notice you. The other is an identity lived from within, already dressed in the clothing of the answer. The secret was never in the ticket. The secret was never in the numbers. The secret has always been in the two words that precede your feeling of already having it. Let that sink into your spirit. The outer world, all of it. The lottery, the bank account, the mailbox, the phone call you are waiting for, none of it is the cause of your life. It is the effect. The outer is always a reflection of the inner. Scripture said it plainly, though most people read those words their whole lives without ever letting the meaning land. The kingdom of God is within you, not somewhere else. Not out there in a jackpot controlled by fate, not in a machine spinning ping pong balls, not in luck that visits some and skips others arbitrarily. The kingdom, the source of all supply, all provision, all abundance, lives inside your own consciousness, and it responds only to what you assume about yourself. This is why some people seem to attract windfalls again and again, as though life is conspiring in their favor, while others, working just as hard, praying just as sincerely, remain stuck. It was never about deserving, it was never about luck. It was about the assumption they carried, spoken or unspoken, into every day. You must realize that imagination is not a toy. It is not something reserved for children and artists. Imagination is the very workshop of God within you. It is the loom on which every thread of your future is being woven right now, in this very moment, whether you are conscious of it or not. Every time you picture lack, you strengthen the thread of lack. Every time you picture yourself opening an envelope with trembling hands and finding nothing, you are, without realizing it, praying for exactly that outcome. The imagination does not distinguish between what you want and what you fear. It only responds to what feels real to you in the present moment. This is the great secret hidden in plain sight throughout every wisdom tradition. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, and the outer world must, by law, rearrange itself to match the inner conviction you carry. Consider this. If a locksmith wanted to open a door, he would not stand outside shouting at the wood, hoping the door might feel sympathy and swing open on its own. He would use the key made specifically for that lock. Feeling is the key, not hope, not wishing, not desperate pleading. Feeling, the actual embodied sensation of already possessing what you desire, is the only key that fits the lock of manifestation. You can say all the right words, you can visualize all the right pictures, but if the feeling underneath is anxious, is needy, is desperate, is drenched in lack, then you are using the wrong key on the right door, and nothing opens. Let this settle within you. There is a difference between wanting money and being the kind of person who has money. Wanting keeps you in a state of distance from the thing you want. The very act of wanting, if you feel it deeply, silently confirms the absence of what you want. This is why so many well-intentioned people who focus intensely on winning the lottery never do. They are, without realizing it, worshipping the absence. They check the numbers with anxiety instead of anticipation. They feel the sting of disappointment before the drawing has even happened, rehearsing the loss in advance, embodying the very lack they hope to escape. The mind that says, I hope I win, is standing in a completely different room than the mind that says, quietly and without struggle, I am the kind of person for whom money flows easily. One is standing outside the mansion peering through the window. The other has already walked through the front door and sat down at the table. Feel this deeply. There was a man in scripture who was told to act as though the rain had already come. in the middle of a drought so severe that the entire land had forgotten what rain even sounded like. He was told to dig ditches in dry ground, ditches that made no logical sense under a cloudless sky, because the water was coming, and the vessels needed to be ready to receive it. This is the pattern behind every true manifestation. You prepare your inner world, and sometimes even your outer world, as though the thing you desire has already been decided, already been settled, already been given. You do not wait for evidence before you believe. You believe, and then the evidence arranges itself to match your belief. This is the reversal that trips up almost everyone who first encounters this teaching, because the entire world has trained you to believe that seeing comes first and believing comes second. But the deeper law, the older law, the law woven into the structure of consciousness itself, says the opposite. Believing comes first, seeing follows. Assume the state of the wish fulfilled, and the outer conditions, no matter how impossible they appear, must eventually bend to match the inner assumption, because the outer world has no independent existence of its own. It is dependent always on the state of consciousness that is looking at it. Notice what happens when you stop asking, "Will I win?" and instead quietly assume, without any tension or straining, that you already have. Notice the difference in your body. The anxious version tightens the chest, quickens the breath, creates a subtle desperation that leaks into every interaction of your day. The assumed version relaxes the shoulders, softens the face, allows you to walk through your day with the quiet confidence of someone who is not waiting for anything because they already carry it within. This shift, this simple shift from waiting to being, is the entire secret that ancient teachers, mystics, and prophets tried again and again to communicate, using every metaphor available to them, because the truth itself is almost too simple for the analytical mind to accept. The mind wants complexity. It wants formulas, rituals, elaborate systems. But the truth has always been startlingly simple. Change the inner conversation, and the outer world has no choice but to follow. Imagine for a moment that you are already living as the version of yourself who received the winning numbers. Not think about it abstractly, but actually imagine it, sensory and specific. Feel the weight of the phone in your hand as you tell someone the news. Feel the specific mixture of disbelief and joy in your chest. Hear the tone of your own voice, lighter than it has been in years, as you say the words out loud. See the exact expression on the face of someone you love when you tell them. Let yourself linger there, not as a fantasy you visit and then abandon, but as a state you begin to live from, a room in your mind you return to again and again until it feels more familiar than your current circumstances. This is not delusion. This is not pretending in the naive sense the word often implies. This is the deliberate, disciplined use of the one true creative faculty you possess, the imagination, aimed with precision at the state you wish to make your permanent dwelling place. The truth is, most people spend their entire lives assuming limitation, without ever questioning where that assumption came from. Somewhere along the way, perhaps in childhood, perhaps through a culture that worships scarcity, perhaps through a family history steeped in stories of hardship, you absorbed a self-concept that said money is hard to get, that luck belongs to other people, that dreaming too big invites disappointment. And you have been living inside that self-concept ever since, not because it is true, but because you have never dared to question it, never dared to examine whether the story you inherited actually belongs to you. Understand this, your self-concept is not fixed. It is not your identity in some permanent, unchangeable sense. It is simply the most repeated assumption you have made about yourself. And repeated assumptions can be revised, can be replaced, can be quietly and deliberately rewritten. The same way an old manuscript can be edited until the meaning shifts entirely, even though the paper itself has not changed. You are not the sum of your bank statements. You are not the average of what has happened to you so far. You are not defined by how many times you have almost had something and lost it. You are, in your truest nature, an expression of a consciousness that is not bound by circumstance, that is not limited by the past, that carries within it the same creative power spoken of in every sacred text as the very name of God. I am. That name is not something distant, worshipped in temples far away. It lives inside your own awareness right now, in this very sentence, in the breath you are taking as you read these words. Every time you finish that sentence with words of lack, you are, in effect, misusing the most powerful name available to you. Every time you finish it with words of abundance, ease, and already having, you are aligning yourself with the very force that shaped worlds out of nothing. Let that sink into your spirit again, because it deserves to be repeated. The power that spoke light into darkness, the power that separates the seen from the unseen, the power described in the oldest stories as speaking a thing and it simply existing. That same power operates through your own consciousness every single day, whether or not you are aware of it. You are speaking things into existence constantly through your habitual feelings, through the stories you rehearse in your mind before you fall asleep, through the identity you carry into every room you walk into. The question was never whether you have this power. The question has only ever been what you have been unconsciously using it to create. This is why so many stories exist of people who came into windfalls that seem to defy explanation. It was not random. It was not mere chance, even though chance is the language the outer world uses to describe what it cannot yet explain. Somewhere within them, consciously or not, a shift had already occurred. Perhaps they had let go of desperate grasping and settled into peaceful expectancy. Perhaps a period of surrender had softened their resistance enough that a new assumption could finally take root. The outer event, the winning ticket, the unexpected inheritance, the surprising gift, was simply the visible fruit of an invisible root that had already changed. This is the pattern behind every manifestation story ever told, whether the person telling it understood the mechanism or not. The inner changes first, always, and the outer follows as naturally as a shadow follows the shape that casts it. Allow yourself to see money differently than you have been taught to see it. Money is not a scarce commodity that must be fought over, hoarded, or won through sheer luck against impossible odds. Money is simply a symbol, a physical representation of an inner state of freedom, ease, and abundant flow. When you carry that inner state, money finds countless ways to reach you, sometimes through effort, sometimes through unexpected channels, sometimes through what the world calls luck. But when you carry the opposite state, tension, scarcity, desperate need, money seems to flee from you no matter how hard you chase it, because you are, at the level of assumption, still identifying as someone who does not have it, and the outer world can only mirror the inner conviction you hold most consistently, not the one you hold for 5 minutes during a hopeful visualization and then abandon the rest of the day. You must realize that consistency of feeling matters more than intensity of desire. A single burst of desperate wanting, however fervent, does far less than a quiet, steady, unremarkable assumption held gently across days and weeks. This is why so many people who try manifestation once, in a moment of crisis, feel disappointed when nothing shifts immediately. They mistake intensity for depth. But the deepest assumptions are rarely loud. They are calm. They are so natural to the person carrying them that the person barely notices they are doing anything at all. Think of how naturally you assume you will wake up tomorrow. You do not strain to believe it. You do not visualize it with great effort. You simply live from that assumption so completely that it shapes your plans, your conversations, your entire orientation toward the future. This is the same quality of belief required to shift your relationship with money, with luck, with the numbers you write on a ticket. Not desperate effort, but quiet, settled, almost boring certainty. Feel this deeply. The subconscious mind, the deeper layer of your own being that actually does the work of shaping circumstance, does not analyze, does not judge, does not decide whether your desire is realistic or reasonable. It simply accepts whatever is impressed upon it with feeling and returns it back to you as experience. This is why children so often manifest things adults consider impossible. Because children have not yet learned to doubt, have not yet been trained by the world to separate belief from reality. The subconscious does not know the odds of a lottery. It does not calculate probability. It only knows the feeling you have given it to work with. If you give it the feeling of lack, disappointment, and resignation, it will diligently, faithfully, without any judgment at all, produce more experiences that match that feeling. If you give it the calm feeling of already having received, it will just as diligently, just as faithfully, begin rearranging the circumstances of your life, sometimes in ways your conscious mind could never have planned or predicted, to bring that feeling into physical form. Consider this. Perhaps you have prayed for something in the past using words alone, reciting a request, hoping some external force was listening and might decide, based on your worthiness or your need, to grant it. This is not how the deeper law works. Prayer, understood correctly, is not asking. Prayer is assuming. It is the practice of feeling, right now, as though the thing requested has already been given, thanking in advance rather than begging in advance. This is why certain teachings insist that you must believe you have received, even before there is any visible evidence that you have. That instruction was never metaphorical. It was a precise, practical description of how consciousness actually operates. Belief precedes evidence. Assumption precedes fact. The feeling of having comes before the appearance of having, every single time, in every single case, without exception. You are not powerless in the face of chance. You are not a passive victim, waiting to see whether fate smiles on you this week or not. Understand this fully. You are, whether you have recognized it or not, the operant power in your own life. The circumstances around you, including the numbers that appear or do not appear, including the doors that open and the ones that remain shut, are responding, in ways too intricate for the analytical mind to trace, to the assumptions you carry most habitually. This does not mean every outcome is instant or immediate. Sometimes the seed planted in consciousness takes time to grow into visible fruit, the same way a seed planted in soil does not become a tree overnight. But the law does not fail. What is assumed with feeling and sustained with quiet consistency must eventually appear, because that is simply how consciousness operates at the deepest level of reality. Let yourself imagine, right now, in this very moment, releasing the old identity that has quietly whispered, "I am someone things don't work out for." Let that identity dissolve, not through struggle, but through simple recognition that it was never actually true, that it was only ever a story you absorbed and repeated until it felt like fact. In its place, let a new and quieter identity take root. I am someone who receives easily. I am someone for whom unexpected good arrives naturally. I am someone who is already provided for. Notice that these are not desperate affirmations shouted through gritted teeth. They are simply gentle acknowledgments of a truth that was always available to you, waiting for you to finally claim it. This is why the two words, "I am," are considered across so many spiritual traditions to be the most sacred and most powerful phrase a person can utter. Not because of the words themselves, which are simple, ordinary, almost forgettable in their brevity, but because of what follows them. Whatever you attach to "I am" becomes your law. It becomes the blueprint your subconscious follows when constructing the experiences of your day, your week, your year, your life. This is not superstition. This is not wishful thinking dressed up in spiritual language. This is the actual mechanism by which consciousness translates inner conviction into outer form. The same mechanism described again and again throughout Scripture, throughout mystical teaching, throughout every tradition that has ever pointed toward the truth that the kingdom is within, that the power to create is not somewhere far away in the sky, but alive within your own awareness in this very instant. Think about this for a moment. If you knew, without any doubt, that a specific sum of money was already yours, waiting only for the right moment to arrive in your hands, how would you walk through your day differently? You would not check your phone anxiously. You would not obsess over numbers with a tight chest and shallow breath. You would move through your day with an ease that comes only from certainty, an ease that other people would notice without being able to explain why. This is not a performance you put on for others. This is the natural result of a shifted inner state. An inner state that has stopped begging and started assuming, that has stopped hoping and started living from the feeling of the wish already fulfilled. The truth is, resistance is the only thing standing between you and the abundance you desire. And resistance is always, at its root, a feeling of lack held onto too tightly. When you release the grip, when you stop straining and start trusting, the resistance dissolves, and what was being blocked begins, often quite naturally, to flow. This is why so many spiritual teachers emphasize peace over striving, faith over frantic effort, quiet assumption over desperate manifestation techniques performed under pressure. The moment you can rest in the feeling of already having, without needing the outer world to prove it to you first, you have crossed the threshold that separates those who wait for luck from those who create their own reality by law. Understand this. You did not come into this life to be a beggar, standing outside the gates of abundance, hoping to be noticed. You came into this life carrying, whether you have recognized it yet or not, the same creative power spoken of as the very breath of God, moving over formless waters, shaping order out of chaos, light out of darkness, substance out of nothing at all. That power lives in your imagination, in your feeling nature, in the quiet, private assumptions you make about yourself when no one else is watching. It has always been available to you. It is available to you right now as you read these words, as you breathe, as you consider what it might feel like to finally release the old story and step into a new one. Let this settle within you one final time, because it is worth carrying with you long after this moment has passed. The two words that hold the secret to winning the lottery, to abundance, to unexpected blessing, to every form of good you have ever quietly hoped for, are not magic words to be repeated like a spell. They are an invitation into a new way of being. I am. Whatever you place after those words with feeling, whatever you assume quietly and consistently, whatever identity you choose to live from rather than merely think about, becomes the very shape of your life. Not someday, not eventually in some vague and distant future. Now in the ongoing present, where all creation actually happens, where the kingdom within is always, endlessly, patiently waiting for you to finally recognize what has been true the entire time. You are not waiting for luck. You are not waiting for chance. You are not waiting for the universe to decide whether you are worthy. You are the one who decides, through the quiet, steady assumption of what you already are, what your life becomes. Consider this a little further, because the mind often needs more than one angle before it truly releases an old belief. Think of the countless nights you may have lain awake, rehearsing worry, replaying the bills, the debts, the near misses, the times something almost came through and then fell apart at the last moment. Each of those replayed scenes was not neutral. Each one was a small act of creation, a quiet vote cast toward more of the same. The mind does not distinguish between memory and rehearsal for the future. When you relive a disappointment with feeling, you are, in that very moment, instructing your subconscious to prepare more disappointment, because that is the state you have handed it. This is not meant to bring guilt. Guilt is simply another form of self-judgment, and self-judgment only deepens the very identity you are trying to release. This is meant only to bring awareness, because awareness, gentle and unhurried, is the beginning of every real change. Notice what happens when, instead of replaying the disappointment, you begin to replay a different scene entirely. Not a scene of struggle finally overcome through heroic effort, but a scene of simple, quiet arrival. You checking numbers with a calm heart instead of a racing one. You receiving news with the settled recognition of someone who expected it all along, the way you expect the sun to rise, without drama, without disbelief, without needing to pinch yourself to confirm it is real. This is the quality of feeling that true assumption carries. Not euphoria, not desperate excitement. Calm, grounded, almost quiet certainty. The same certainty you carry about small, ordinary facts of your life that you have never once questioned. The truth is, most people search for the secret to winning, as though it exists somewhere outside themselves, in a system, a formula, a set of numbers chosen a particular way, a ritual performed at a particular hour. And there is nothing wrong with rituals, nothing wrong with structure, so long as you remember that the ritual itself has no power. The power was never in the candle, never in the specific words spoken, never in the particular numbers chosen. The power was always, entirely, in the feeling state the ritual helped you enter. A ritual is simply a doorway. What matters is the room you find yourself standing in once you walk through it. If the ritual leaves you anxious, checking for signs, desperate for confirmation, you have walked through the wrong doorway and ended up in the same room of lack you were trying to leave. If the ritual leaves you calm, settled, and quietly amused at how simple it all is, you have found the room where creation actually happens. Let yourself imagine, for a moment, the version of you that has already lived through this. Not fantasizing about them as someone separate from you, but recognizing them as simply a future point along your own timeline, already existing in the vast field of possibility, already breathing, already relieved, already free of whatever financial weight you may be carrying now. Every version of you that could exist already exists in the timeless field of imagination, waiting only for your attention, your feeling, your assumption to draw it into visible experience. This is not fantasy. This is the deeper structure of reality that mystics throughout history have tried, imperfectly, through the limited language available to them, to describe. Time, as you experience it, moving in a single direction from past to future, is not the whole truth of things. Within consciousness, every possible version of your story already exists, and what you experience as your life is simply the version you have, through habitual feeling, chosen to inhabit. You must realize that you are not asking creation to do something new and unprecedented on your behalf. You are simply asking your own attention to shift toward a version of reality that already exists within the infinite field of possibility. A version where the resources you need are already present, already flowing, already yours. This reframe alone can dissolve enormous amounts of tension because it removes the sense that you are begging an indifferent universe for a favor it may or may not grant. Instead, you are simply remembering, reclaiming, and stepping into what was, in some sense, already true the entire time, in the timeless dimension beneath the surface of ordinary experience. Feel this deeply, one more time, because repetition is how the subconscious finally accepts a new truth as its own. Abundance is not something you chase, it is something you become. Luck is not something that visits certain people at random. It is the outer name given to an inner state of expectancy so calm, so assured, that circumstances have no choice but to rearrange themselves to match it. The two words "I am" are not a magic incantation to be recited a certain number of times, in a certain tone, at a certain hour of the night. They are a doorway into the deepest truth of your own being, a truth that has been waiting patiently, without impatience, without judgment, for you to finally walk through and claim what has always quietly been yours to claim. So let the old identity fall away now, gently, without struggle. The way a coat you no longer need simply slips from your shoulders when you stop holding it in place. Let a new and quieter identity settle into its place. One that does not need to shout, does not need to strain, does not need external proof before it can rest in its own certainty. I am provided for. I am free. I am the kind of person good things find easily. Let those words become less like affirmations you repeat and more like simple facts you have finally remembered about yourself. The same way you remember your own name without effort, without doubt, without needing anyone else to confirm it. Understand this, because it is worth carrying carefully. Nothing about this inner work asks you to abandon wisdom, to ignore responsibility, or to stop living practically in the world as it is. Assumption is not a replacement for living sensibly. It is the invisible foundation beneath every sensible action you take. A person who has shifted their inner identity to one of abundance does not necessarily stop working, stop planning, stop making thoughtful decisions. What changes is the spirit in which those actions are taken. They are no longer taken from fear, from desperation, from the gnawing sense that disaster is always one step behind. They are taken from a calm center, a quiet knowing, an inner peace that no longer needs the outer world to prove anything before it can rest. This is why some people, once they release the desperate grip on winning, once they stop obsessively checking, stop bargaining, stop pleading, often find that unexpected good begins to move toward them from directions they never anticipated. Not always through the exact channel they were originally focused on, but through the underlying state that channel represented. The lottery was never truly the point. Money was never truly the point. What you actually wanted, underneath the specific form, was freedom, ease, the end of a certain kind of worry, the feeling of being taken care of being safe, of having enough. When you learn to generate that feeling from within, independent of any single outer event, you free yourself from the narrow trap of needing one specific outcome to arrive in one specific way. You open yourself instead to receiving that same feeling through 1,000 possible doors, any one of which the universe, faithfully mirroring your inner state, might choose to open. Think about this for a moment, gently, without pressure. What would it feel like to no longer need the win in order to feel at peace? Not because you have given up on receiving it, but because you have already, within yourself, tasted the freedom it represents, and that inner freedom has become more real to you than any outer circumstance could ever threaten. This is the deepest form of the teaching, the place where manifestation stops being a technique performed under strain and becomes simply the natural overflow of a life lived from wholeness rather than lack. From this place, desires still arise, still move you, still color your days with anticipation and creative energy. But they no longer control you. You hold them the way you might hold a flower, gently, appreciatively, without crushing it in a desperate grip. Let this settle within you now as the journey continues. You were never asking creation for a favor. You were remembering a truth about your own nature that fear had temporarily obscured. The two words, "I am," were never a spell to unlock some external vault of luck. They were, and remain, an invitation back into the truth of who you have always been beneath the noise of circumstance, beneath the years of repeated lack, beneath every story you were ever told about how the world works. You are the one who assumes. You are the one who feels. You are the one who, quietly and without needing applause, decides what state to live from today. And whatever state you choose to live from, faithfully, patiently, without exception, becomes the very shape of the life that unfolds around you.